Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 24. The three of them sat together, each with their legs tucked under them. Ahsoka at Yoda's left, Kawani at Yoda's right, each with a hand on the shoulder of the diminutive figure. Each could feel the sorrow and grief emanating from the other and their emotional retreat. The fire crackled before them, licking their torn faces in a pirouette of light in dark recesses, exposing age, time worn, and battle won. There was no sound from outside the hovel, only the crackle of the dying fire and their heartbeats. Nature had also felt the impact of loss and wept silently out of respect. My mother told me to carry an invisible string when I was a child that I could imagine attaching to everything or everyone I was afraid to lose. Kawani stirred the silence. I understand that the Jedi were taught to let go of those things. She wasn't sure how precisely to continue, letting the words find their purchase in the others and herself. This thing is real. She decided to change course, perhaps or perhaps not, to find a way to work in what she was trying to say. Has a way of putting things into perspective, reality does, Yoda said without removing his gaze from the embers. Fear is also reality, Miss Yamat. If it is not stopped, other systems will suffer the same fate, Kawani remarked. If it is not the Emperor's will to destroy all, no, this was a message, Ahsoka chimed in. To instill fear is to command control. Fear is not the enemy. Complacency is, she paused. Learned a great deal you have, young one, Yoda added, his eyes still fixated on the dancing firelight. I had no choice, Master. They were all quiet again for a few moments, small insects taking the cue from the light conversation within that it was acceptable to add their voices to the fold. Master, Ahsoka broke the verbal silence. I have no intention of facing Vader again. I have no intention of facing the Emperor ever. My path is unfolding before me, and there are many separate ways to navigate it. I came here looking for answers, for permissions of sorts, but I realized I have had those answers all along. What I ask of you now is guidance of a practical sort. Ahsoka, honorable your intentions have always been. Guidance from me you do not need. Those answers, too, you already possess, Yoda replied. On Mustafar, learn what you can, then find young Bridger. That is where your heart lies. She felt every word from the old, wizened master and realized his blessings and gratitude did not come from a Jedi Grand Master, but from a friend. She could sense a feeling of both remorse and joy coming from him. Born from fear or perhaps suspicion, she could not decipher, but did not want to impose on him to reveal its source. She let it be what it was. Ahsoka, training Miss Yamat will need. I pose to both of you, Yoda said, shifting topics entirely. I will, Ahsoka snapped before Yoda could utter another word. I need her with me. Kawani heard the words and felt their truth wash over her, embracing her entirely. She had never heard these words, and a warmth spread like wildfire. Yoda smiled a smile Ahsoka had never seen before. In fact, it was quite creepy, but she felt it in it a sense of sincerity she had never known the old master possessed. The contrast to strife friendship truly is, he said when his mouth would finally allow words again. Ahsoka smiled gently and laid a hand over Yoda's. A great many things I have learned from you as master, she paused briefly. A great deal more from you as a friend, she finished and wrapped both arms gently around the small frame, feeling a tiny clawed hand on her elbow in return. Ani, it's time to go, Ahsoka stood up. It was a pleasure meeting you, Master, Kawani said, understanding fully how to address him now. She too wrapped her arms around Yoda, feeling the same return gesture. Getting up, she reached the doorway where Ahsoka had placed a small hollow emitter upon an exposed portion of route and was waiting for her. She paused briefly. Turning back around, she strode to close the distance back to Yoda and held two pinched fingers before him as if offering. Staring at her in bewilderment, she slowly opened his palm and placed the end of the invisible string she was holding on it. She smiled, folded his fingers into the palm, and kissed his forehead. I will never forget, Master, Kawani said, then turned and walked out of the door behind Ahsoka. They had walked some distance in silence, the rawness of the recent tragedy still very fresh in their hearts and minds. The mid-morning light burned off some of the night's steamy mists, yet not all, requiring at least a little attention be paid to their footfalls. The air smelled damp, but felt lighter to them, as if a weight that they had been unable to decipher was lifted without their knowledge. I appreciate your confidence, Ahsoka, Kawani remarked, wanting Ahsoka to know that her words earlier were not lost. Her voice crackled unintentionally, a cadence between high and low inflections, as the sentiment she felt growing in her could no longer remain checked. You were serious about the training, weren't you? I mean, even before, on our way in. Ahsoka hid a smile as she pushed a choking vine out of her way. Quite. Do you know the way back to the ship? No, to be honest. I wasn't paying much attention on the way in, Kawani stated. Ahsoka could hear a breath of exasperation behind her. I thought you knew. I do, Ahsoka said. So your training continues now. And she stopped dead in her tracks, Kawani running right into her back. The deflated feeling in Kawani only grew more profound upon colliding with Ahsoka, not wanting to have any of the wrong answers. Sorry for that. What precisely do you mean now? She asked. Exactly that, Ani. Your training will continue now. You are going to guide us back to the ship, Ahsoka stated. Continue because you are already utilizing what you learned on the way to Master Yoda's. Kawani was quite sure Ahsoka had spent far too much time with Yoda. Huh? Was all that came out. Ani, you can't feel yourself drawing on the Force? Ahsoka asked. I was thinking about it, but now that you pointed out, I can. But that is a matter of psychology, is it not? Ahsoka wasn't going to get baited into Kawani's sense of humor, but in her mind, she was rolling her eyes and planting her head firmly into her palm. Ani, I can feel you drawing it in. I can sense it drawing itself to you. There are only two logical paths to imagine. You are either denying it, or you have always been acutely aware of it, but it has become involuntary over time. Close your eyes, she instructed, Kawani snapping them shut immediately. Without prompting, Kawani took in enough air to expand her chest to the breaking point, held it for a moment, and slowly blew it out. She felt herself first, in this place, in this very spot, and then felt everything around her. The insects she hadn't even noticed earlier were keeping their distance, not out of fear, but out of respect, for lack of a better term. They didn't feel threatened by her. It was a reverence of sorts for her very being, and at that she understood what Ahsoka had meant. Kawani could feel the same respect from the winged creatures swooping high above, the trunks of the trees all around her, canopies hidden high above the dense mists and steams rising from the ever-present waters. The water also held her in high regard, presenting itself to be utilized when needed. Amphibians, reptiles, and other creatures that slithered and scurried did so out of reverence. The heartbeat of nature, both immediate and cosmic, could be felt, in sync, always with the same rhythm. Because of that, she surmised, the entirety of the whole could never be genuinely gauged, an orchestra of trillions all in perfect harmony. She shook her head to return her thoughts to the here and now. I feel it, Ahsoka. All of it, she said softly. The truthfulness in the statement was not exaggerated. A smile cracked her motionless lips as she embraced all the ebbs and flows of life around her. She sensed Ahsoka and could almost see her in her mind, a silhouette against a dark backdrop. Ahsoka silently moved to her right, avoiding the broken branches and dead leaves at her feet, watching Kawani intently. Left foot over right foot, crouching lower with each movement to take up a position behind her, seeing Kawani's head move downward ever slightly and lifting the left side of her head, her eyes still closed. I see you, more than feel you behind me. I see you, Kawani whispered. Good, Ahsoka said, softly. Now extend that sight. She paused, giving Kawani time to do as much as she moved, precisely the same way back in front of her. I see a small lake off to my right. Further still, rock formations and trees. Different from these, but the currents of the force flow into and out of them precisely as these do, even the rocks and the water. To my left is a deep bog, impenetrable by foot, that extends for kilometers. 3 kilometers ahead and slightly to the left is a ship. No, not a ship, a pod? And you're right in front of me, she finished, opening her eyes slowly with a smile. Perfect, Ani. I thought I was quite quiet enough. You didn't make a sound, Ahsoka. I told you I can see you, Kawani said. In the Force, or more accurately, through it. Ahsoka gave her an approving smile. Let's check into that ship or pod you saw, Kawani agreed and took the lead immediately. With your eyes closed, Ani, Ahsoka added. Kawani's footfalls slowed somewhat, but did not stop moving forward. Her feet dodged jutting stones, muddy holes, fallen debris, and the occasional rodent. Her arms and hands were busy brushing aside tangling choke vines, branches, and even an enormous snake's body, not quick enough to allow passage. Ahsoka silently bobbed her head in acknowledgement of the achievements, unsure if even she would have been able to navigate that smoothly. After a few more minutes of the same, Ahsoka stopped. Ani, hang on. Kawani paused midway from sliding her right foot over an exposed root and turned her head back, eyes still closed shut. What's up? She asked. While certain elements will naturally come very easy to you, there is much more to learn. Kawani took one of her sabers, the Shoto blade, from her belt and tossed it lightly on the ground. Take it, Kawani cracked her left eye open a fraction and eyed the hilt. It may or may not be your destiny to wield one effectively, but you're going to learn how to use one. Oh, okay. She consented and moved to go back and grab it from the ground. No, Ani. Use the Force, Ahsoka said. How? Opening both eyes now, she turned squarely around to face her. I have given you all the information I can, simply through the instruction to retrieve the hilt. The how is up to you, Ahsoka replied. Kawani stood for some time, wondering how long she would ever be able to answer, asking herself over and over how to carry out the task. She would glean over thoughts, then thoughts upon thoughts to the point of confusion, and would inevitably come back to trying to relate the initiative to her ability to see the Force, then scolded herself for trying to do anything as she remembered Ahsoka and Yoda speaking freely about doing or not doing something. If I try, I've already failed, she concluded. But if I don't try, I'll never succeed. Her words caught her ears, and she realized she had spoken them out loud. I said that out loud, didn't I? It was a statement, not a question. Ahsoka could see the mental torment Kawani was going through and slightly raised both hands. Ani, relax. You're overthinking. The point is not to think at all. Know that you can, then know that you will, Ahsoka said slowly. It is precisely the relationship you have to identify and affect the flows of the Force that will allow you to utilize it. Let that flow and bring it to you. Affect the current into it to alter its speed and trajectory and pull the current leaving it. Focus not on the item, but the Force into and out of it. Kawani closed her eyes again to focus her mind and see the precise flow into and out of the hilt. She focused on several other items in the background and focused on diverting the flows around them and into the idle hilt. Small stones, broken branches, a snake, and a dead rodent began shivering around Ahsoka's feet. Not sure what Kawani was doing, much less thinking, she took a step back. Ani, the hilt, ouch! Ahsoka began to refocus her study when a stone hit her squarely in the back of the head. What the hell? You distracted me, Kawani said, arms up over her head in exasperation. Okay, let me rephrase that. You don't need to divert the flow from anything else to affect a separate flow to a singular item. Affect the flow itself and nothing else, Ahsoka said. Kawani blew out a pent-up breath and put her hands on her head while spinning a full 360 on the spot. You can clearly do this. That stone hurts, so just focus, Ahsoka stated. Kawani closed her eyes again and planted her feet. Trust yourself, Ahsoka said again, quietly, coaxing the action. Kawani saw the flow she needed to effect, focusing on it intently and willing it to speed up while negating the flow out of it. A slight ripple of current quickly evolved into a torrential slipstream. Then she released her hold, shooting her eyes open to see where it was. She quickly scanned the ground where the hilt had been, then at Ahsoka, staring up into the trees at something well above the mist line. Well, we'll work on that, Ahsoka said, eyes still skyward. A splooch of water behind Kawani signified the saber's landing. Was that what I think it is? She asked, squinting her left eye shut. You better get that force vision working. I like that saber, Ahsoka said jokingly. But no, seriously, find it, please. Kawani felt terrible about the outcome, but was beaming inside. She turned around and shot off in the direction of the splash. Ahsoka shook her head slightly, but could not hide her smile whatsoever.